Let me get everything started here, and we're set to
And
go.
I want to. So you're, yep, you're all good then.
Good. So I want to jump into it. Lots of business owners out there today, because of pandemic, just because of regular market conditions, they're having lots of problems, lots of challenges. Um, what do you think? How do people fix this? How do you come in and start to help them sift through all of these challenges that they're having, Phil?
It's to me, it's real. It's focus. If we are clear of vision, if we know exactly where we're going, and being clear of vision in a COVID world is challenging at best.
Hmm.
So, it's in theory, it's great to say, but really striking that balance, understanding that we have to be evolving, we have to be moving and bobbing, and nothing is quite the same. But we still have to have that clear vision. And guess what? There will be a world after COVID. So poising ourselves and positioning ourselves so that when we come out of this thing, that we come out stronger than before and poised to take advantage of a new market and a new reality.
Yeah, I agree. Right, I was doing a podcast actually yesterday, and I had someone on, Ravi, and we were talking about this idea of what really happened in COVID. And he works with lots of different types of organizations, large and small. And he said what COVID really did was it just broke the business processes that were there in place. They hadn't built it for a pandemic. I mean, nobody had. Uh, but that's what broke, right? And I'll call them the blind spots, right? There were blind spots that were now what were the limitations to the process, and that broke. And that's what you do, right? I mean, that's what you kind of come into the company. I mean, you've got a little bit of history in the business, pest control specifically. That's what you do, right? Am I getting that right?
100% spot on.
So I like to dig into your bio a lot. I mean, I've got you've got a lot of accomplishments, a lot of accolades, and I want to touch on a couple of the things that I thought were really really interesting. I love this part where you say, I help businesses learn, implement, and fully integrate the knowledge, tools, and proven systems to align, transform, and excel in organizational and team leadership. Getting everybody on the same sheet of music. I mean, gosh, I can't even seem to do that in my family, much less at my company. But this idea of you worked at Cooper Pest Solutions, you were second generation. I think I read a stat in here saying 60% of second generation businesses don't make the mark; they fail. You did well. You got lots of awards and accolades in local press and media. What was what brought you to today? What were all the learnings in that in what you've done?
Tons of learnings. I mean, mistakes after mistakes after mistakes after mistakes. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur, and what we as entrepreneurs, we just want to try and do, and you know, it's understanding, where my strengths are and where my weaknesses were. Gino Wickman wrote a book, Traction, and a lot of people on the, who are listening to this probably have read Traction or Rocket Fuel or one of the Wickman books. And there's a thing called a visionary. And a visionary is simply, the person who's at that 20,000 foot level, who's got like 20 great, 20 ideas, of which 17 are garbage, and starts distracting the company and going all over the place. Well, you're looking at a classic visionary. This is it. And I'd make my people crazy. There's no doubt. And, trying to harness that over the years with Cooper and getting that, taking that craziness and channeling it, and then making everybody on the team great. And that's what we did. We built great leaders in Cooper. And Cooper just continues to just rocket in the world of Terminix, who eventually acquired us in May of 2018. Those leaders are just crushing it because of the things that we did with both EOS, the Wickman system, and what we did with our leadership program. So channeling all that as an entrepreneur, that was if that sort of gets you where you want to go.
So let's dig into EOS. I mean, I've been exposed to EOS a couple of times, and it's a system that gives you a framework to start scaling your company, right? So you get everyone in alignment. I want to dig in a little bit, just sort of this idea of visionary. I got to tell you myself, I mean, I would say in the last 2 to 3 years, I've gotten comfortable calling myself a visionary. I had this idea of a business. I thought I was a little bit, I don't come across as an arrogant prick calling myself a visionary all the time, honestly. Right? And then I started to finally own the fact that, yeah, that's what I do. I've got this idea and I've got this mountain that I want to run up and conquer. Talk to me a little more about that visionary. How does someone find out that they're a visionary, first of all? What are the traits of a visionary?
Well, I think one, while I can talk about it, I would really suggest if some of this resonates, Rocket Fuel, which was written by Wickman and Mark Winters, is a must read, because it goes through a list of the traits of a visionary and the traits of what we call an integrator. And the integrator is the person who runs the company every day to day and, is harmonizing a company. And then you have the visionary, and the visionary is this person who, again, loves big ideas, is way up, in the clouds, comes up with all, loves big relationships and big meetings and big stuff. And they're coming up with, every day they've got something else and another way of tweaking it. And what happens is, so many times us visionaries end up being the integrators of our companies. And when we're trapped in that role, what we end up doing, it's very, very simple. We go to our team and we come up with a great idea and they get, oh my God, they get so enthused. And you start going and you're going in that direction, I don't know, for a month, 2 months, 4 months. But then we can't help ourselves as visionaries and we come up with a new idea or a tweak, and we go to the team and we all of a sudden have them when we jerk them in another direction. And you're jerking them back and forth and they get exhausted. And they look at you as a visionary and they say, what, you're killing us. And the problem is that we don't have that integrator to rein us in. And we don't have that integrator to figure out, of those 20 ideas, which were the 17 that were garbage, but which 3 were the golden ones that nobody else had. And so having this visionary and integrator relationship is the real key. And knowing that you're a visionary and not being trapped in that integrator's role and making your organization completely nuts is also key. But it's great to be in, and most organizations where the visionary is the integrator, the organization they don't view visionary as a great thing, because you are making them absolutely completely crazy. But when a visionary is unleashed and let to do their job and doesn't get in the way and doesn't do the integrator's role, magic happens. It's just amazing.
I read that book and I put it in the comments here, Rocket Fuel by Mark Winters and Gino Wickman. It was a quick read. I think it took me, it was a page turner for me. I couldn't turn the pages fast enough, because for the first time ever, I felt like someone had been watching me my whole life, and the hairs in the back of my neck were standing up, and it was giving me the heebie-jeebies. I don't know if that's a good word anymore.
Yep. Well, Vinny, our integrator, was doing went through the test on the visionary, and he was just marking down. He was looking at me and he went like, check. He goes, you checked every box. Like you are a visionary. I mean, and he thinks of himself as part of an integrator and part of a visionary. He has some dual traits. I don't have any of the traits of an integrator. I mean, like, you put me in that I can do an integrator role and I can do that stuff, but I don't like doing it, and I can't sustain it.
So this is interesting, right? I mean, our conversation is about this idea of using data to compete with the big guys, right? Yeah. And I want to kind of bring this all together and because we started going down this path, I still think there's a tie here, right? And that is, starting to understand what are the strengths of the individuals in the company is probably the first step to starting to figure out. Look, if you don't know first gear comes before second gear comes before third, you're going to have a hard time getting that car going 100 miles an hour. And I think that's maybe the sort of the reading between the lines here is figuring out who's sitting at the table and what are their strengths, visionary versus integrator versus all the other roles. Am I getting that right? Yeah,
you are. Absolutely. And where you're going to go, and I'll let you take it for a little bit further on the data side. You're where that that data is everything. And how we use that, how that integrator uses it, how an organization uses the data and how they grab it. And, so you go ahead and ask a few more questions, because this is I won't shut up on this stuff.
Well, yeah. Look, I call myself a little bit of a recovering analyst. I used to work with Homeland Security and Department of Defense when people were talking about gigabytes of data. I was talking about terabytes and petabytes, right? Gigantic sums of data. And what I started to find myself personally was just this idea that the data is good, but once you start to figure out the story that comes out of the data, oh man, now you're starting to cook with
Mm.
some gas, right? That's some good stuff. And I think that's part of the real secret here is that what you do and how you come into organizations, help them figure out who are the right butts in the right seats, if I can say that,
Hmm.
right? And then starting to study each one of them and how they're performing in their roles. Now you can start to hold people and to standards and
Well,
expectations.
yep. And I think there's, a couple challenges here from a small and medium-sized business owner. And, to me, small and medium is, 2 million to 50 million, even $100 million is still small. You know, I had the unique opportunity post Cooper to get to work in the highest levels of Terminex. As a senior director reporting right into the C-suite, and I got to see data in a way that I never saw it before, and how we could grab data and manipulate it, and using things like Microsoft Power BI, and I would like go, wow, like if I only had this at Cooper, if I could have drawn the data. I mean, like it was fascinating to me, and I never thought that you could do that on a smaller level. And what we know now is along with what you're doing, you're able to go and into those different data sources, the fleet numbers and the operational data that we have and the different sources, and bring them together and manipulate it so that we can then take that and, in the world of EOS, produce an amazing scorecard. Because a predictive score, and that's what we teach in entrepreneurial operating system, and Wickman talks about it all the time, and you cannot be more correct, which is, so many times in our scorecards, we look at outcomes. We don't look at predictors. We don't look at the activities or the leading indicators that tell us what the outcomes are going to be. Sales and profit and expense are great, but that's not what, those are the outcomes. And we're talking here about predictors. And so if we can go into our data, all the data that we've got, and gather it and find predictors for each of our leaders and each of the roles, whether we're talking operations or sales and marketing or finance, or into some of the sub realms of HR and fleet or service delivery. And if we can find those great, if we can measure the activities that are happening out there and match up trends, then it gives us something that's actionable. And so there's, again, I look at, we have problems in two realms in the world of entrepreneurs. One, most small businesses can't gather the data and manipulate it in such a way that they can find those great indicators. And then, to your point, if we are lucky enough to get that, most organizations don't even know what to do with that data and how to leverage it into great execution.
So a way I tried to explain to someone one time is I said, so you know how a speedometer works in a car. I mean, that's data. It's raw data telling you how fast you're going right that second. But let's say that there was I can't tell you how many owners of businesses I've talked to, and I say, hey, do you have a spreadsheet that says, an Excel spreadsheet that says January, February, March, April, it's got a tab for every month. And you kind of hear this, yeah, I got one of those. I said, how much time do you spend on that, right? What if that speedometer, that data that you get into that spreadsheet, what if it's a day old? What if it's a week old? What if it's a quarter old? How do you actually drive that car at full speed when that data that's coming from that speedometer is 15 minutes old? Can you really drive it fast? And I think that's part of what EOS and what you're kind of teaching these people is, hey, let me start to teach you what that speedometer is so you can figure out how fast you can rev that car's engine and how fast you can go. Is that
If
right?
I know what we need to be doing every week, I'm going to manage differently. I mean, and to that point, if you're measuring it every week, you probably can measure it every day, and you can probably measure it even, at a faster rate. But look, I mean, at EOS, we look at it on a weekly basis, on a 13-week rolling. It's rolling. It's not. We're not doing it in quarters. We're doing it in 13-week rolling segments, so that we're always looking at trends, and we're looking at 5 to 15 measures at most. Really, hopefully like 10 of the key the key activities that are driving the outcomes. And again, in each of the areas, because we use the scorecard to hold our leaders accountable. I mean, EOS is about accountability, and the accountability of not just the leaders in the company, but everybody in the organization. And if everybody has a number that they're accountable to and they know how to drive that number, and that number drives outcomes, magic happens.
So we get a couple of people on the who are listening in here. I would really love to hear where you're from and what you're doing, and if you're so inclined, tell us what brought you in and what is interesting about what we're talking about here as a topic. Would love to have your comments. So Phil, let's kind of talk more about this data, right? And I call it sort of the special sauce, the secret sauce, what makes the company a superhero. And I even put a tweet out there about this idea that a company that understands how to use its data, it's already there, right? And all the systems that you're using, if you're able to use that data, you keep all of your competition in your rearview mirror all the time, because they're constantly trying to figure out how to catch up, because you're making decisions in real time. They're trying to figure out how you're doing, but you're adjusting real fast, right? And that's what you're talking about, this 13-week sliding scale.
Yep.
Is that right?
Correct.
And what does that transition look like from a company who starts out when they're like, let's give this thing a shot, to 13 weeks later after having done this? What does that transition look like for that company?
When you're, the scorecard, the data component is one of 6 components in EOS. So I'm not going to, I would never, want anybody to think that, if you're looking at data in a 13-week realm, that, magic by that self is going to happen. We've got to have clarity of vision. We've got to have the right people in the right seats. We've got to have that great data, and we've got to have that great scorecard. We have to know the issues that are emanating from it. We need to have core processes that are followed by all, and we need to have that pulse of the meeting pulse and all that stuff. But when you do have that data going in that 13-week realm, and if you've got that great scorecard and you're looking at it each week and you're saying, am I on target or off target? And it's yes or no. Did we do the activity or not? And if we didn't do the activity, what happened? Like, why didn't it happen? And looking for the root cause of it and really searching and knowing how to figure it out, that's where the magic is. And it doesn't take very long. It doesn't take very long at all.
So I want that this is great, right? I mean, I mentioned this idea that I got this little soundbite from Ravi, who I had on the podcast earlier this week. And he said what broke in COVID was all these business processes. And I think this is where you're saying, this is where you can start to identify some of that stuff, right? Mm-hmm. You can start to say, here's a process that's breaking down, and don't wait till it catastrophically fails, right? You're building data that's starting to say, we're marching in the right direction, we're marching at the right rhythm, or we're not.
Yeah, and right? I'm not talking an SOP. Yeah. I'm not talking a how-to process. I'm talking the major steps, 3 to 7 steps that outline the major key steps, and it's visual. I can see it. There's a few words. They're the core processes, and almost everything that breaks in our companies follows. It's going to be in one of those core processes, and you're going to look and you're going to figure out where it went wrong. And ultimately, within that process, it usually goes wrong in one of those 6 things I said before. It's either we messed up our vision. We went and started doing something we shouldn't have been doing. It's not what was in our, we got out of our lane and what makes us special. There's a problem with our people. Maybe we're measuring the wrong thing. It's possible we could be measuring the wrong thing. We'll figure that out. Usually that's not the case, but sometimes it could be that the process itself was wrong. Although generally, if we've done a good job of that, it shouldn't be that. But we find out real quickly where it's at, and so we can go in and fix. Because what we don't want to do is what we most, as entrepreneurs, we do over and over again, which is we meet with our teams and we talk about a problem and we dissect it, and we go and we fix it, but we actually fix the symptom. We don't fix the root cause, and we find ourselves talking about it again 5 weeks later, 10 weeks later, 2 months later, but it's because we're talking about something that it's not the same problem. It's a similar problem, but it was the same problem. Because if we would have found the root cause, we wouldn't have just solved the one problem. We would have probably solved 10 problems.
Yeah,
We do it all the time, and it's so easy to do.
You're fixing the symptom, not the actual.
Well, and we do that over and over again as entrepreneurs. I mean, that's just, we just haven't learned the discipline of going in with our teams and really doing what we call, issue solving. So, truly identifying the root, discussing it, and not repeating ourselves, and then solving it and putting it away forever.
Give me an example. And what I mean by that is, so week 2, week 3, you've built your first set of scorecards. You're starting to measure some data. You're starting to look at something. Company says, I suspect everyone says, I think we have a sense of what we need to be looking at. 12 weeks in, 13 weeks in, they're like, this is a symptom we're solving. And they may not use that language.
Yeah.
But we were supposed to be looking at this, and we were looking at this. Can you give me an example of that?
Yeah, I mean, it could be as simple as, we have an activity that is supposed, there's an activity that we would want, 10, take it in a sales perspective, maybe, we want 10 appointments a day. I don't know. Or, 10 appointments a week. Is the problem the people? Is our problem the sales manager? Is it the people? Is it our process? Is the process that we're asking them to do wrong? Is it our training programs? Where is the root problem of it? And do we find it in other places? And we're going to dig deep to figure out where is the true problem, because typically we make it a people problem when it's not really a people problem. It's usually a process problem or a managerial problem. Sometimes it's a people problem, but much more often it's, I'll give you another one. We have downtime. We talk about this all the time. Is it, when we're looking at downtime, is it that we have a vehicle sitting in traffic for 20 minutes when they didn't make a right or a left, because they didn't turn on Google Maps because they don't feel they need it, and they're just sitting idle? Well, if I'm sitting in my office and I don't realize that, and I'm not seeing real-time data, and I'm not matching up data to productivity and different measures, I don't necessarily see that. But why did that happen? Was it because of training? Is it because we have, what's causing that person to do it? And how many other people in my organization are doing the same thing as that one vehicle? That's data. And data starts to tell you where those trends are. It really helps you start to figure out where the root problem is.
Yeah. So I've actually been starting to get a little more educated myself. One of the things that I used to think, having worked in data and technology for a long time, we used to talk about this idea of KPIs all the time. And KPIs are these specific measures. I mean, what is your idling time? How many visits did you make today? What is your revenue out per hour, for example, right? And what we started doing is what is the next step beyond KPIs? And it's this idea of behaviors, right? Behaviors are a series of performances together, as in, does Jack versus Sam versus, Scott complete, what behavior are they exhibiting that's really good? And that all comes from, you can't get there without the data to understand that behavior. Is that making some sense to you?
Totally. And it goes back to who in our companies are doing best practice. I mean, again, we teach, I do a lot of teaching of leadership, and leadership on not an executive level, but in the mid levels of our companies, where we need great executive leadership, but we need to be solid in the guts of the company. That's, to me, where the magic really happens. And within there, what we're looking for is, how do you leverage those things? And, a good mid-level manager has, 8 to 10 direct reports, and they're probably, in the pest control industry, they were in the field. Well, guess what? Those guys and gals each have unique abilities that are special, but do we know what, and we think we know what they are by interacting with them, but do we really know what they are from the data behind them? Because we don't measure it. We sort of look and kind of look at the data, but we don't really, because as small businesses, we don't get the like the word I love you that you use is insights. And can we, and do we have the empathy and all those things that ultimately truly matter. And this is what I learned at Terminex, which was data tells you a lot. I mean, data will sniff out stuff. Now, data doesn't tell you everything. You still need to get in the field and you need to watch and you need to be with your people. I'm not going to sit behind a desk and look at a bunch of reports and just start hopping on the phone. I want to go validate and I want to look, but gosh, it speeds up the process way quick. And it tells you things that, you know what, maybe I didn't realize.
So the way I think of it, I'm kind of curious how this sits with you. Is the way I think of data is the text in a book, right?
Mm.
And you could have the wrong text in the wrong page and it makes absolutely no sense. What a master author does is put the text in the right place in a book so that you've got a fantastic story that is captivating, that makes sense. And you say, I understand what's happening and where this is going to lead. I mean, the best stories are the ones where you go, I know what's coming around the corner. You don't know exactly what it is, right? But you're like,
Right.
I can't wait to find out, right? I think that's kind of what these scorecards and these dashboards that you create, as you start to dig into these issues, that's what you start to do is you start to find that story or the narrative that makes these companies go.
Spot on. Absolutely.
Because I feel like a lot of people get scared because of data, like, oh, I don't, data is an Excel spreadsheet. No, I think that's step one of data.
Well, I think they get scared of what's the right measure. I mean, figuring out what the right measure is for companies is an art in itself. Really what I mean, and every company is unique. I do not subscribe to anything that there's a great scorecard that should be applied to every company. Each company, that I interact with, whether it's in pest control or HVAC or elevator maintenance or an insurance brokerage firm, they're each they have they're unique. They have different cycles. They have different things that they're different activities, different things that they're measuring, things that are important, different culture. And all those things bring different data points that we want to be looking at. So figuring out what the right data is step one that we want to see. And then figuring out how to go into all the data that we have in all the data sources and bring them together, which again, that's the void out there right now. In small business, we don't do that well. We just don't do that well. We have independent separate systems that have lots of data, and I go to my fleet management system and I look at my fleet stuff, and I go to my operating software and I look at my operating stuff, and I look at my accounting stuff and I see my P&L, but I don't bring them together because I don't know how to bring them together.
Yeah, that's right.
But you bring them together, and if you can start to tell that story, and then if you bring in other things and you can kind of create a spider net over top of it and find trends and predictors, wow, like power. and that's something we as small business owners we just have not had. I mean, you can create scorecards, and in EOS we create scorecards, but we don't have powerful score. There's a difference between a scorecard, which is great, which makes us do EOS well, and really having a great scorecard. And I think great scorecards are coming down the road. We don't have them yet. They're not far away. When you can take data like you can take it and manipulate it and produce those outcomes, just you want to get me jazzed and get me juiced. Now we're talking.
Hey, whatever floats your boat, Phil. I mean, it is interesting stuff for me too, right? The idea that you can start seeing these things and being so intentional in the way you do stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I remember when I first did, I've got a background in artificial intelligence, machine learning, and I got to tell you, I was probably the prettiest girl in the class, which is not saying much at all, right? And it was never really interesting when I went to dinner parties. I went out to bars and talked to friends about it, whatever else, right? No one's cared about data. I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much power here. But I think it's the application of it, right? When it's put in the right framework, oh, that's cool stuff.
Because again, you go back. I mean, as we get into big data, I mean, well, let's take it a step further. It's not just the data that we possess in our companies. What about when you marry it up with weather conditions?
Yeah.
And when you all the other data that is out there, and you start marrying it and putting it together, and you're doing it in ways that the big guys do. Look, and you do it without, and when you look at Google, and you're amazed at the algorithms and what they're doing and how they just, they know every step of what we're doing, and they know our behaviors. It's just big data at work. And, Microsoft has talked big data, and Google has talked big data, and Amazon talks big data. But big data hasn't made it down to the, I don't want to say the little guy, but yeah, the little guy and the medium guy. We don't use big data, not yet. And I'm going to say not yet, because it will become, and it's going to change things. And it's going to be those entrepreneurs that latch onto that big data and the data that they have inside and match it up to the big data. And I think there's change. The winds of change are coming, and there's going to be some great opportunities out there, fun opportunities.
I personally hope I can shift some of that, right? I mean, that's really an interesting space, pulling all that stuff together and eliminating those blind spots. But I want to kind of bring us back to this idea of competing with the best, the big guys, right? We've talked about this idea of data. We've talked about this ability to manage expectations and create this accountability. So now we have this ability to build a well-oiled machine. It takes some time and takes some effort to get there, but you pay attention to it and you start building this well-oiled machine. How does that position somebody to compete with the big guys? Is that really the right question? Is that the right?
Yeah, I do. I think it is. I really struggle a lot of times with business owners that say, we had this big organization come into town and wipe us out. So, you take a hardware store. I think it's the easiest one to think about. You've got a really, really, you've got a hardware store, and it's family owned, and they've been running in the town for 50 years. And, in comes Home Depot, and they get wiped out. And they think it's their God-given right to operate in that town, and the town should support them, and that they shouldn't be wiped out by Home Depot. But there's reasons why people don't go to that hardware store. Now, on the other hand, I can show you some amazing hardware stores in the backyard of Home Depot and Lowe's that are thriving. So how does that happen? And it happens because they know that to compete with the big guys, you've got to be different, and truly got to be different. But there's things that, why do people go to those big box stores? And there's certain things that they want. And those ones that have been able to survive deliver those things, but they deliver those things and more. And they're delivering things that Home Depot and Lowe's could never deliver. So it's really understanding, in the world of EOS, we call that the marketing strategy. Who's your target market? And I know who my sweet spot is. If I have somebody that wants to just buy a commodity and buy a commodity price, guess what? I guess they're going to go to Home Depot. But if they want what we have, they're going to come to us. And then we've got to have our three uniques, the things that make us different. What makes us different than Home Depot? And truly different, not where we say it and we don't do it. And we better be doing it better than anybody else in the marketplace. And we're going to be different, and we're going to distinguish. And whether you're in pest control or, again, elevator maintenance or HVAC or pool maintenance or landscaping, I don't care. And, we think that sometimes the bigger guys can, they're bigger and they have it, no, I don't care whether you're a 1 or 2 man operation or you're a 100-person operation like we were at Cooper, or, you're, somewhere's, even bigger. It's all the same. And so, yeah, you can absolutely compete with the big guys. And then, again, you do all those things. And then if you marry it up with the other stuff, and then if you take the tools that the big guys have, and you can, use them in a way that, allows you to still be yourself and allows you to be that special, unique company. Again, I call that the magic. So that makes sense.
It does to me. And I think I'm going to pick and choose a couple of parts of what I know of EOS and sort of the whole vision traction organizer and sort of the 6 dimensions that you take a look at. I mean, I think what I'm hearing and distilling a little bit of what you're saying is, look, if you've got a vision, that vision is probably going to be different than what, as a hardware store, for example, a pest control company, HVAC company, that vision of what you're going to be as a company is going to be different, fundamentally going to be different than the other company. That's it. That's a black and white statement. There may be some overlap
Yep.
because you guys are in the same industry, but how you execute on the mission, on the vision that is yours, means you're fundamentally different. You don't care about anything other than mosquitoes, right? And you do that really, really well. So you're not worried about roaches. You're not worried about bed bugs. You focus on mosquitoes, and you are just like Jiffy Lube is to oil changes. You are to mosquitoes, right?
And
You optimize everything. Right.
And in the world of EOS, and when you look at that vision, and I think it's very important, people think vision is that statement that you see on a wall that nobody remembers. That's not what we're talking about here. I mean, and again, the way Wickman describes it and the way we teach it, there's 8 questions that we're trying to answer. First, what are your core values? And I think that really, with any company, really is where it starts. And you've got to know what the values of your company are, and you live it and breathe it. I mean, look at Chick-fil-A. I mean, there's your example. I mean, they have got it down, and it's why no matter where you go, everybody's smiling and everybody's happy, and these kids are just they clone them. Because they all have the same values. And that's my favorite example. So what are your core values? And then what is your core focus? What are you in business for? Why are you there? What's your purpose, passion, or cause? And what's your niche? And then where do you want to be long-term? Where do you want to be in 10 years, between 5 and 30? And then driving that down, what's your marketing strategy? And that marketing strategy is what we just talked about. Who's that target market? And what are your 3 uniques? And, what's your experience? What's the journey, the process of the journey of every customer that goes through your company? And we take that over, and then we say, okay, so now where are we going to be in 3 years from now? What does the company look like? Because that's the vision. And when we say vision, it's the vision that's going to be shared by everybody in the organization. So what does that 3-year look like? And then let's bring that 3-year back to 1 year. What do we need to do next year to carry that vision, to get to that 3-year, and clearly identifying what that looks like with the 3 to 7 priorities for the company, so that we can share them with everybody. And then we take it to that 90-day world we call, rocks in EOS, but 90-day priorities, and clearly identifying those 3 to 7 organizational priorities and who in the company is going to be responsible for them. And then finally, what are all the things that are getting in our way, our issues, the things that are obstacles? And when we share and that makes up the vision. That is the vision of the company. And when everybody knows what that is, wow.
That's powerful.
Because that's not a paragraph that's framed on the wall and it says vision. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about something very, very different.
So the idea that popped in my head, I remember way back when I used to watch the NBA, and David Robinson was playing, and there used to be the Sultans of SWAT, and the whole idea back then was that if you step into the lane, David Robinson was like, not in my neighborhood, right? And that basketball was going to get thrown into the 19th row of the rafters, right, of the bleachers, because you don't come into his zone. And I think this is kind of what people need to think of that vision as, right? This is my paint, right? You don't step into the paint here because that's mine. And Home Depot is not looking at that. Lowe's is not looking at that. Terminix is not looking at that, because they're looking at something else. Mm-hmm. You say, this is mine. Don't step into this because I will kill you there.
And right? Everybody in the organization believes it and is living it. And because they do it, it becomes easier. And because you're doing that, you then are willing to empower people, because that's another word that's thrown around all the time. Well, we're going to empower our people. Well, great, but can you truly empower them? And again, you go back to what we started, using data with the big, competing with the big guys and using data. It's great to have data, but all this, what do you do with the data? Like, once you know what you have, it's great. Once you have, now you know something. Can you do anything with it? And that's where there's, again, I say it's like, it's a 3-part cookie. One, it's like an Oreo. Here's the data, and here's what you do with it. And, here's the stuff that we don't have right now, the creamy middle, which is grabbing it all together. So we can grab it all together and manipulate it and bring these outcomes and, things that we don't get right now, which is what we need. But once we get that, what are we going to do with it? And, again, it goes, I think you're spot on. You got to have that vision. If you don't have the vision, you can have all the data you want all day long. You're probably not going to do a whole lot with it. And so we've got to utilize the data correctly.
So, I mean, if I kind of keep going down this path of that analogy, and I think it's still working here, is what the data allows a company to do is, well, what a vision allows you to do is carve out your box, your niche, your space that nobody else can come into because you do that so well, right? You do it, again, Jiffy Lube does oil changes, right? Nobody else does oil changes like Jiffy Lube does. They don't do all this other stuff. They started to venture into it, but that's what they made their name on. That's why they got so big. So now this vision allows you to define, this is what I am, right? And the data tells you every time you're stepping outside of the paint, right? So you can say, let me bring my foot back in because I don't want to be out of the 3-point line because I'm now starting to get outside of what I do really well.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Is that a good analogy?
Well, I'll give you a great one. We knew at Cooper, our target market for residential was homes, single family homes with a household income over, joint income of over $100,000. Well, how many homes were we doing that didn't fit that target market? Oh, I mean, I know the ones that we were, I knew how many homes we were doing in a zip code, but was I matching it up to their household income? No. Did I think I was in the target market? Yes. Did I look at my market saturation as a guidepost? Yes. But did I really know? No, I really didn't know. Would it be good to know? Sure would.
So we're talking about a lot of stuff here this is not something that happens overnight, right?
I don't think so.
Yeah, at least I haven't seen it yet, right? This is not a red pill, blue pill kind of option here, right? Take the blue pill and all of a sudden, everything's taken care of. For me, lots of times in the past, getting off the couch was the first and hardest thing to do, right? Give me steps. Give me, step 1, step 2, step 3. What are the first things that people, if this is kind of scratching an itch, right? I don't even say it's an itch, right? There's a feeling inside. There's something that's keeping me from doing what I want. It's keeping me from growing the way I need to. It's keeping my employees from staying with me or being engaged. What is step 1, 2, and 3? Someone they can take home, jot down on a piece of paper and say, all right, I'm gonna at least kind of start down this path. What would you suggest?
I mean, to me, step 1 is finding an operating system, whether it's EOS or Verne Harnish's Scaling Up, or there's a number of different ones out there, and it's maybe reading a few. Step 1, becoming educated on either one or more operating systems and picking one, because I don't care what organization you are, you need to be on. If you're frustrated, if you're not hitting your potential, then you need to be on an operating system. And if you're one of those unique companies that is just naturally doing it already, kudos, great. You've got step 1 solved. But most CEOs, most entrepreneurs haven't figured that out yet. And they are frustrated. They feel like that hamster in the cage. They're doing a lot of things. They're making progress. They're not growing as fast as they'd like, or they're not making as much money, or, things are happening. So that's step 1. Step 2, once you pick that operating system, is getting it into place and making sure that it's truly operating seamlessly. And then, again, whether it's, something like EOS and getting an implementer like what I do, or, just making sure it operates, just is really running on all cylinders. And then the third step, which I think is, where we go into the data, It's because you're going to now have that operating system up and running, and you do have that clear vision, and you've got the cadence, and you're gaining traction, as Wickman would call it. Now it's taking those scorecards and now it's putting some juice to it. Doing something that's really, really, really special, because I do believe that there is just a lot of magic out there that we're just, even when we put EOS into a company, that there's even more out there if we could get into that data. And I do. When I think about data, I do get excited, because I know how much difference we can make as EOS implementers out there with companies implementing EOS. There's no greater joy than I have going to another company, working with their leadership team, putting in the EOS, getting their leadership team lockstep, getting that organization going all in the one direction and what they can do. But I know if we can add amazing, really, really amazing data, not the data that we're talking about up to this point, that's step 3, is supercharging that organization with great predictive data, so that we really start to influence behaviors, and we do some amazing stuff.
My brother works for Amazon, and he has talked me through the process by which they iterate. He's run a couple of business units, various business units. He kind of talked me through it, and I asked him, so what do you think is, what is it that they do really well? And he said, gosh, they spend so much time just understanding every single click. I mean, I don't know, it was maybe 7-8 years ago that Amazon passed Google in the number of searches on a daily basis. And I think that came out of left field for a lot of people. Wait, what? They spend so much time combing through the data, and that is what makes them, whether you love them or hate them, that's what makes them fantastic at what they do, right? UPS isn't just a little scared about Amazon Prime having airplanes. They're a lot scared about it.
Mm-hmm.
But then that has also made UPS kind of go back to the drawing board and say, so what really are we that we do that Amazon is not, right? So they can peacefully coexist. And I think what I'm hearing from you is just this idea of taking that data to really, truly define what you are and what you do. That's the bee's knees right there.
Absolutely. I mean, it is so defining, and I don't care what industry you're in, and I don't care what size you're in. We are products of the behavior of our people. I say that leaders, managers have one job. We have only one job. That's to make our people great. If our people are great, everything else takes care of itself. I forget which, I was with a company last week, and they said they just shifted their entire focus away from their clients, their customers. And you would go like, oh my God, like they're not customer centric. And they said, no, everything that we're doing is on the employee level. We're not worrying about our customers anymore, because we're giving all the tools to our employees to deliver the great experience, so that they know what the journey of the customer is supposed to be. We are going to make sure that our employees are always in a winning position. This is, I'll go back to my Terminix days. The CEO that was at Terminix when I was there, Nick Vardy, a man who I just admire to the ends of the earth, would say to me, Phil, always remember, we need to put our people into winning positions. Winning positions. And it's a very simple statement. It goes back to the company that I was with last week, and it goes back to data. If the data helps us put our people into winning positions, we can focus on our people so that they can deliver the behaviors. Most people want to do good. I'm not going to tell you that everybody you hire is great and wants to be great. That's not. But the majority of people want to be great. Another side story would be, I would go to dinner parties when I had my company, the pest control company, Cooper Pest, and people would say, Phil, where do you find your people? We had Joe working on our house for 5 years, and Joe got promoted, and then Laura came in, and Laura was better than Joe. And then, Laura was, she was only around a year and a half because she had to move with her family out to California. And then, Harry came in, and Harry was as better than Laura. Like, all you do is find these great people. Like, how does that happen? I said, you know what? There's tons of great people out there. We just put every one of them in a winning position. We work relentlessly, tirelessly hard to make sure that they know what they need to do to be great. They want to be great. The problem is that we take people and we put them into losing positions, and we don't measure the data correctly. We're not giving them the information. We don't have that vision. We don't put in that system in place. And what happens? They don't perform. So it sounds simple. I wish it was that simple. It isn't that simple. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of diligence. But guess what? There's a lot of companies out there doing it, and there's some companies that are doing it great. And you can do it, and that's how you compete with the big guys, for sure. No question about it.
So I'm going to step back through that again. So number one, you got to take the time to define your vision. You define your lane, right?
Yep.
David Robinson, right? So that's number one. Then you start to figure out when you're stepping out of the lane and when you're staying in your lane, right? Because if you don't know when you're stepping out of your lane, you're doing something that's not effective anymore. You're doing something that's ineffective, right? So the data is going to start to tell you when you're doing effective things versus ineffective things. And as you start getting better at doing effective and ineffective, look, you're going to want to start to expand your lane, right? And if you're going to expand your lane by putting more people in it, I mean, the analogy is breaking down here, but you're going to start playing more games on the road. People are going to get tired, right? There's different personalities in play. People are going to leave the team because they need to, not because they have to, right? Whatever. Right?
Whatever.
Things change, but now you say, look, anybody who comes into this house, this is the way it works, right?
Yeah.
And everybody has their expectations clear, and you always know up front whether they know what it is that they're supposed to do or not. And it's not a matter of reining them back in. It's a matter of saying, let me make that easier for you, because they can run full speed by themselves.
They want to. That's all they want. All they want to do is do a great job. Most people, they need to make a look. The average, person out there isn't the entrepreneur. They're looking to, they need a paycheck. They're putting food and shelter, and they're trying to provide for their families. They're working really hard. They would much rather have a good time doing what they're doing than going through the motions to just get a paycheck.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that as we move and we look at generations, and I know, I will subscribe also that, I spend a lot of time helping organizations understand and leaders to understand it does change generationally when we look at those people. It's a whole different topic. We could spend hours talking about generations. One of my favorite topics, but what we're going to do with the up and coming Z generation and how we're going to put them into winning positions and to use that data with them is different than exactly what we do with the millennials. And it's not just millennials as a group. It's younger millennials and older millennials. And it's also understanding that just because you're in a group doesn't mean that you're not an individual. And I know millennials that act like boomers. I know boomers that act like millennials. And, so there's a lot going on here. But when we really, really, really take the time to understand it, and we want to put those people and our people into those winning positions, and we know the scorecard that we want to be watching and the data that we want to be watching and the behaviors that we want to have them exhibit, and we make sure that they're empowered to exhibit those behaviors in the proper way, and we give them all the things and we put them in those winning positions, they'll go to the ends of the earth for you. And again, I look at so many business owners, will complain about, boomer business owners will say, oh my God, those millennials. And the tired story. They're lazy, they're this, No.
That's right.
No, absolutely not. Millennials will outwork a boomer any day of the week when they're given a reason to, when they want to.
I put a post on LinkedIn a few weeks ago. I said, if you consistently as a manager tell your staff and employees what they're supposed to do and when they're supposed to show up and how they're supposed to show up, they may consistently surprise you and actually do it. It's amazing if you just kind of put this information in. And I think kind of, as we're getting closer to the end of our time here, I think sort of wrapping all of this together, what I'm hearing is, if you came to this to listen to about how you're going to beat a big company with the data, that I might say there might be a slightly different question you should ask, as in, where is it exactly that I want my company to be that company is not? Because if I can start to figure out what I am that they are not, then I can be fantastic at that in a way that they can't compete with me. It's about me winning as opposed to them.
Yeah, and if you have that, you're going to basically then know what data you need to support that. Data underlies the essence of what we are. Data helps us stay pure to what we want to be. Data helps us be accountable to the things that we know we have to do.
Yeah.
And so data is a tool. We get that other stuff out there first, and then you couple it with data. That's why I say I get so excited about the prospects of what lies ahead with data, because when we can really harness data, when you have that great company that's already done those things, yeah, magic. It's magical.
Well, I sincerely hope anybody who gets a chance to listen to this was able to walk away from this and hopefully, I like to call it up-level their thinking. It definitely up-leveled my thinking just in the way you represented some of these things. I enjoyed the opportunity to talk to you.
And I would, look, anybody that's listening that would, if you want to share some stories with me, or, I love talking to folks and helping, and, anything that I can share with, share to help people, that would be, brings me my passion. So, just reach out to me.
I would like to share your contact information as I put some of these things out there, if that's okay with you. Okay.
Would love for you to do that.
Well, Phil, I'm going to